It all started one ordinary morning, just like any other. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through my phone, when she told me, my wife, Sophia. She was leaving for a business trip. She had always been a hard worker, dedicated to her job, and I trusted her completely. But that morning, something felt off. She seemed too eager, almost too excited for a simple work trip. Her suitcase was packed quickly, as if she was in a rush, and the usual signs of planning were missing. No meetings were mentioned, no details shared. Just a quick, "I'll be back in a few days." As she left, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't like me to question her, but my gut told me something wasn't right. I shrugged it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, I found myself staring at the clock, waiting for her to text me, to check in as she usually did when she was away. But there was nothing. The silence was deafening. Still, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was busy with work. The next morning, though, things started to get stranger. I noticed her phone was left on the kitchen counter. An unusual move for Sophia, who always kept it with her. I picked it up, hesitating for a second, but then curiosity got the better of me. I saw nothing unusual at first, just work emails, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, I saw a message from a man named Mark that caught my attention. He had sent her a text saying, "Can't wait to see you later. Hope the trip is going well." Something stirred inside me. I had never heard of a Mark before. Who was he? Why was he messaging her like that? My heart raced and my mind began to spiral. Was this just a colleague? Or was there more to this business trip than she had told me? The feeling that had been growing inside me now bloomed into full-blown suspicion. I tried to push it aside, to rationalize it as nothing, but my mind kept circling back to that text. My wife had always been so honest with me, so why would she keep something like this a secret? Couldn't shake it. The doubt, the questions. And that's when I realized I couldn't just sit around and wonder. I had to find out the truth. The days without Sophia felt longer than usual. Each morning, I woke up to an empty side of the bed, the quiet house echoing with the absence of her laughter, her voice, her presence. It was strange how someone could be there 1 minute and gone the next, and with every hour, the feeling in my gut grew stronger. Something wasn't right. I tried to act normal, going to work, keeping busy, but the thought of that message from Mark kept nagging at me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. My mind would replay the words over and over. "Can't wait to see you later." The tone, the familiarity, it all seemed so intimate. I knew I had to keep my distance. If I confronted Sophia right now, she'd deny everything, and I'd look paranoid, desperate. But I couldn't just do nothing. My mind kept circling back to one question. What was she doing on this trip? I began to pay closer attention to the little things, her habits, her actions before she left. Sophia had always been a planner. She would tell me every detail of her day, the meetings, the deadlines. But now every detail seemed vague. She kept her phone on her more than usual, and whenever I asked her about the trip, she'd give a short answer, a quick smile, and change the subject. It wasn't just the phone that bothered me. It was the way she acted around me. There was a distance, a coldness that hadn't been there before. She didn't seem as eager to talk, to share the little details about her day. I'd catch her staring off, lost in thought, as if something or someone was on her mind. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking. But the more I thought about it, the more the doubt settled in. Every little change, every little action seemed to add to the puzzle. It was like she was hiding something from me, and I hated the feeling. I hated the way it made me second-guess everything I knew about her. Then came the night Sophia was supposed to return. I waited up for her, excited to hear all about her trip, eager to finally put my mind at ease. But when she walked through the door, something felt off. She was acting strange, almost nervous, and there was something different in her eyes. A flash of guilt? Or was I imagining it? She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said she was tired from the trip. But there was a hesitation in her voice, a tone I hadn't heard before. Was it the exhaustion from her long day? Or was it something else? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I wanted to ask her about Mark, about the text, but the words felt stuck in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined everything over something I didn't fully understand? But then I thought about the gut feeling that had been with me all week. The feeling that something was being hidden. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. Over the next few days, Sophia's return didn't bring the relief I had hoped for. If anything, it only deepened the suspicion. She was home, yes, but something was different. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the changes were there. Tiny, subtle things. And as time passed, I couldn't ignore them anymore. Her smile seemed forced, almost like she was pretending to be happy around me. It wasn't the same smile that used to light up her face. When we talked, she was distracted, her mind elsewhere. Her responses felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. It was as if the woman I knew so well was slipping away, replaced by someone unfamiliar. One morning, I was making breakfast when Sophia walked in. She was dressed in a loose blouse and jeans, but the usual spark in her eyes was missing. She didn't greet me with her usual affection. Instead, she simply gave me a small nod and sat down at the kitchen table, her phone in hand. That phone, it had become a constant source of tension. She was glued to it even when we were together. I couldn't help but notice how she held it tightly, never letting it out of her reach. The same phone that had once been left lying around carelessly now seemed like her most prized possession. She checked it constantly, scrolling through messages, tapping away, as if it was the only thing that mattered. I tried to talk to her, to connect. How was your trip? Really? Any interesting meetings? I asked, trying to sound casual. She paused, her fingers stilling on the screen. For a moment, I thought she might open up, but then she quickly smiled and said, "It was fine. Just the usual stuff. Nothing exciting." She quickly changed the subject, asking me about my work. But I didn't buy it. The way she avoided my eyes, the quickness in her tone, told me she wasn't being honest. She was hiding something. Later that day, I found myself watching her more closely. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I couldn't help it. My eyes followed her every move. When she went to the bathroom, I noticed how she quickly locked the door behind her. When she left the house, she would almost always say she was going to run errands, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling me everything. One evening, as I sat on the couch, I heard her phone buzzing from the other room. My heart skipped a beat. She didn't hear it at first, so I stood up, walking quietly toward the source of the noise. I peeked around the corner and saw her phone screen lighting up. The name on the screen was Mark. It was like a punch to the stomach. There it was again. The name I had seen before, the man who was sending those intimate texts. I didn't want to snoop, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know what was going on. I slowly grabbed the phone off the counter, my hands shaking. I unlocked it. Thankfully, she didn't have a passcode. And there it was, text after text. Most of them were innocent enough, work-related. But there were others, private messages that made my blood run cold. One text stood out, "I missed you. Hope you're coming back soon." Another read, "Can't stop thinking about you." The truth hit me like a freight train. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had promised me loyalty, had been hiding something. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a business trip. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront her now? Should I wait and see how far this went? I couldn't just pretend everything was fine anymore. I decided then and there. I needed to find out the truth, and I wasn't going to let her hide it from me any longer. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control, that I was watching my life unravel right before my eyes. The doubt was eating at me, growing stronger with every passing minute. Sophia had changed, and not for the better. There was something off about her behavior, something hidden beneath the surface that I couldn't quite reach. And I needed answers. The messages from Mark had left me reeling. But I knew, deep down, that confronting her without concrete proof would get me nowhere. I had to be smart about this. I needed evidence. I needed to see it for myself. That night, after Sophia had gone to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at her phone. The texts still lingered in my mind, each one like a dagger that drove the suspicion deeper. I had to know more. I had to catch her in the act, whatever act that was. I knew I couldn't just ask her directly. She'd lie, and I'd be left with nothing but more doubt. But if I could gather enough proof, I could confront her with the truth, not just my suspicions. And so, the idea came to me sharp and sudden. Spy cameras. Felt wrong, sneaky even. But the thought of watching her carefully, seeing what she was doing when I wasn't around, gave me a strange sense of control. I knew it wasn't the ideal way to handle things, but it felt like my only option. I couldn't let her get away with this. The next morning, I drove to a local electronics store, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked down the aisles, past rows of gadgets, and found what I was looking for: small, discreet cameras. The kind that looked like everyday objects. A smoke detector, a clock, a lamp. Perfect. I couldn't risk her discovering what I was doing, so I needed to keep it hidden. I bought a few and brought them home, my mind racing with all the possibilities. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew I had to know. I had to see the truth, no matter how painful it might be. That afternoon, while Sophia was out running errands, I set to work. I placed the cameras in spots where I knew she would never think to look. One in the living room, disguised as a smoke detector. Another in the bedroom, hidden inside a clock. And the last one I placed in the kitchen, disguised as a lamp. As I worked, my hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was doing. Was I going too far? Was this invasion of privacy going to tear everything apart? I wasn't sure, but at that moment, I couldn't think about anything else. I had to know the truth. By the time Sophia came home, everything was in place. The cameras were set, and all I had to do now was wait. The next few days passed in a blur. I watched Sophia closely, but now, my eyes were always scanning her movements, wondering what she was doing when I wasn't looking. I knew she was acting different, but was it because of the cameras I had hidden, or was it something else? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the moment came. I was sitting on the couch, my heart racing, when I decided to check the footage. I sat there, frozen, as I watched the videos play on the screen. I saw Sophia come home one evening, looking around the room, as if she was making sure everything was in place. She walked straight to the kitchen, picked up her phone, and sent a quick text. The camera in the bedroom showed her pacing around the room, checking her reflection in the mirror. But then, something happened that I wasn't expecting. Sophia's phone buzzed. She picked it up and smiled at the screen, her fingers typing quickly. She sent a message and then another. Her smile grew wider as she looked at the messages. The name that popped up was unmistakable: Mark. My heart sank. I could feel the walls closing in around me, suffocating me with the weight of the truth I was seeing. The messages were more than friendly. They were intimate. I saw the way Sophia's face lit up when she read them, the excitement in her eyes as she responded. It was clear, this wasn't just a business trip. There was something else going on. Something she had been hiding from me all along. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I needed more. I needed the full story. The footage from the spy cameras felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't stop watching it. Over and over, I replayed the moments. Sophia's excited expressions, the way she'd react to Mark's texts. Each time, the evidence became clearer. This wasn't just a flirtation. This wasn't some harmless work trip. Something much deeper was going on. But there was one thing that stuck with me, something I couldn't quite shake. On one of the video clips, as Sophia was texting Mark, there was a moment when she glanced at the door, as if she was afraid someone might catch her. The look in her eyes, a mix of guilt and nervousness, sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the text that bothered me. It was the fear behind her actions. She was hiding something bigger than I had imagined. That look, it was the first real clue. It wasn't like Sophia to act nervous or afraid. She was always confident, in control. So why now? Why was she scared? The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I wasn't going to confront her with the cameras just yet, but I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I had to keep my eyes open for anything that might give me a better understanding of what was going on. I needed to be subtle, but I also had to act fast. I was running out of time. As Sophia went about her day, I followed her movements closely. She went to the kitchen where she took a phone call. It wasn't unusual for her to take work calls, but this one was different. She was whispering, speaking softly, as if trying not to be overheard. I caught the tail end of the conversation. "I'll be there tonight," she said. "Same place as last time. Don't worry, everything's under control." I froze. Same place? My mind started to race. What was she talking about? Who was she meeting? And why was she being so secretive about it? The first clue had led to another one. I knew she was lying, but to who and why? That evening, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I had planned to do, but the thought of her sneaking around, hiding something from me, pushed me into action. I had to see for myself. I had to know where she was going and who she was meeting. Sophia left the house just before sunset. She didn't say where she was going, just that she was meeting a colleague. It didn't take much to follow her. I waited until she drove off, and then I grabbed my keys. I followed her car from a distance, careful to keep out of sight. She drove through the city, making a few turns here and there, until she stopped in front of a small, nondescript building at the edge of town. It was a place I didn't recognize, tucked away in a quiet, almost abandoned part of the city. Sophia got out of the car and walked inside without a second glance. I parked a few blocks away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to be careful. I didn't want to get caught, but I had to know what was going on. I waited for what felt like hours, watching the building, my mind running wild with possibilities. What was she doing there? Who was she meeting? I needed to know, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. Then, finally, the door opened. A man stepped out. It was Mark. The world seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man from the texts, the man who had been sending Sophia those intimate messages, was standing right there in front of the building, smiling at her as she walked out. I could see them talking, laughing even, as if they shared some secret I wasn't supposed to know. I watched in disbelief as Sophia got into Mark's car. My heart sank as they drove away together, leaving me behind, stuck in the cold night, with nothing but my shattered trust. That was it. The first real clue. They were seeing each other. They were more than just friends. The evidence was right in front of me. Sophia wasn't just hiding a flirtation. She was hiding a full-on affair. I had my answers, but now the real question was, what was I going to do with them? The drive home that night felt like a blur. My mind was spinning, replaying everything I had just witnessed. Sophia and Mark, together, laughing, sharing moments I never imagined they had. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the betrayal. The way she had looked me in the eye, smiled, and pretended everything was fine while lying to my face. I barely remembered how I got home, but I found myself standing in the doorway, staring into the empty house, the quiet of it pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to shout, but there was no one here to hear it. Sophia had just walked out of my life, and I didn't even know how to react. But even with all the pain, one question kept nagging at me. Why? Why would Sophia go to such lengths to hide this? Why had she been so careful, so secretive? And why had she kept me in the dark for so long? The next morning, I decided I needed to dig deeper. The spy cameras had given me the answers I needed about the affair. But there was something more. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just an affair. There had to be. I sat down at my computer and began going through everything I had. The videos, the texts, the places Sophia had been. But nothing seemed to connect the dots fully. It was frustrating. I knew there was something I was missing, something bigger than I could see. That's when I came across something unexpected. In one of the video clips, I saw Sophia grab her purse before heading out the door. It wasn't unusual for her to grab her purse, but in the footage, she took it and quickly opened it before she left. It was a small thing, but my gut told me it wasn't just a casual movement. There was a sense of urgency in the way she did it, almost like she was hiding something. I couldn't remember if I'd seen that purse before, but it caught my attention. It seemed like she was concealing something inside it. I felt a strange sense of dread as I played the video back, analyzing every movement. Later that day, when Sophia left the house again, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the pieces to fall into place. I had to act. I quietly went to her purse. My heart pounded as I reached inside, carefully pulling out whatever it was she had been hiding. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find something, anything, that could explain her behavior. What I found wasn't what I expected. At the bottom of her purse, buried beneath the usual items like her wallet and makeup, was a small, plain envelope. It was a strange thing to be hidden so carefully, tucked away where no one would notice it. My fingers trembled as I opened it, pulling out the contents. Inside the envelope was a set of flight tickets, but they weren't for business. They were for a vacation for two. I stared at the tickets in disbelief. The destination? A beach resort in the Caribbean. And the date? It was just a few weeks away. But the thing that caught my attention the most wasn't the vacation itself. It was the name on the reservation. The tickets weren't just for Sophia. They were for Sophia and Mark. I felt my blood run cold as the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The affair wasn't just a one-time thing. They were planning something more, something big, a getaway, a trip, a future that didn't involve me. All the pieces started to fall into place, and the truth was uglier than I had ever imagined. Sophia wasn't just hiding her affair with Mark. She was planning to leave me. They had been making plans behind my back, and I was just a fool, left in the dark. I stood there, frozen, holding the tickets in my hand, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her now? Should I let it all come crashing down in front of her? Or should I keep watching, waiting for more pieces to fall into place? But one thing was clear. The truth was out there, and I wasn't going to let Sophia and Mark get away with this. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The vacation tickets, the hidden plans, the way Sophia had been sneaking around. I was done being in the dark. But there was still one thing left. The truth was right in front of me, but I hadn't confronted her yet. I didn't want to make a rash decision. I had to gather every last piece of evidence. I spent the next few days watching Sophia more closely than I ever had before. Every word she said, every move she made was under my scrutiny. I wasn't just trying to catch her in a lie. I was trying to understand her. Why? I kept asking myself. Why was she doing this? What was Mark giving her that I wasn't? I had my answers, but they didn't feel like closure. They felt like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Sophia wasn't just running away with Mark. She was hiding something deeper, something more personal. This wasn't just about infidelity. No, there was something more at play here. Something that made Sophia, the woman I thought I knew, turn into a stranger. One evening, I decided it was time. Sophia had just come home from work, and she was acting strangely quiet. Too quiet. The usual smile was gone from her face, and she barely looked me in the eye. It was almost like she was waiting for something, waiting for me to do something. I didn't know if she could tell that I knew, but I had a gut feeling that the moment was coming. It was inevitable. I sat down at the kitchen table, trying to act casual, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Sophia had changed. She wasn't the same woman I had married, and that hurt more than anything else. Sophia, I began. My voice steady but laced with a tension I couldn't hide. There's something I need to ask you. She looked up, surprised but trying to keep her cool. What's going on? She asked, her tone too calm for the situation. I took a deep breath. I know about the trip, I said, holding up the envelope with the flight tickets. And I know about Mark. Her face instantly shifted. The calmness that had been there moments ago was gone, replaced by an almost panicked look. What are you talking about? She said, her voice shaky. What are you trying to say? I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her. The truth was there, staring me in the face, but Sophia wasn't ready to face it yet. Her body language said it all. She was guilty. She wasn't ready for the truth to come out. But I was done hiding behind unanswered questions. Don't lie to me anymore, I said, my voice softer now, filled with disbelief. I've seen the videos. I've seen the tickets. I've been watching you, Sophia, and I know everything. The color drained from her face as the weight of my words hit her. You've been watching me? She whispered, almost in disbelief. I said, my voice growing stronger. I had to know the truth. And now I do. For a long moment, Sophia didn't speak. The room was thick with silence, a tension that felt like it could crack at any second. But I couldn't back down now. I needed the truth. She finally spoke, her voice low and almost regretful. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. I didn't want to hurt you, but you did anyway, I said, my words sharp but controlled. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, hiding things from me. I thought we were building something together, Sophia. I thought you were the woman I married. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She had made her choices, and now I had to face the consequences. I don't know when things changed, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want it to happen, but it did. Mark, he just understood me in a way you didn't. I felt alone, and he was there. I never meant to hurt you. Her words hit me like a slap, but they didn't bring the comfort I had hoped for. They only confirmed what I feared all along, that Sophia had drifted away from me long before I even realized it. I don't know what to say, she added, her voice now barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you, but I've been lying to myself, too. I stood there, stunned by her confession. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. It didn't fix the hurt. It didn't erase the lies. The damage had been done. I don't know if we can fix this, Sophia, I said quietly, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. For the first time, Sophia seemed to break. She dropped her head into her hands, her shoulders shaking as she cried. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not now. Not after everything. The truth had finally surfaced. But it wasn't a victory. It was just a painful reminder of how far we had fallen. The silence that followed Sophia's confession felt suffocating. We sat there across from each other, with only the sound of her muffled sobs breaking the stillness. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing in a million directions, trying to process what I had just heard, what I had just seen. But amidst all that chaos in my head, one thing stood out. How could I have been so blind? For months, I'd lived in a world where everything felt normal, where I trusted Sophia with my heart. Now all of that was shattered. I stood up slowly, pacing the room. The pain was almost unbearable, but there was still something gnawing at me, something I couldn't shake off. The truth about Sophia and Mark was out in the open, but I still didn't have all the answers. And that's when my phone rang. I almost didn't want to answer it. It seemed like everything in my life had turned upside down, and I wasn't sure I could handle anything more. But the call kept ringing, and the curiosity tugged at me. I glanced down at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Mark. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. I didn't know what he could possibly have to say to me, but I couldn't ignore it. Not now. I pressed the answer button, my voice cold as I spoke into the phone. What do you want? I said, trying to keep my anger in check. There was a brief silence on the other end before Mark spoke, his voice shaky but confident. Listen, man, I don't know how to say this, but I didn't plan for things to go this far. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his words. You didn't plan for this? I thought bitterly. You didn't plan for this? Really? You've been sleeping with my wife behind my back, and now you're trying to act like this is just some accident. Mark sighed, as if trying to find the right words. I'm sorry. I really am. I never meant for things to get this complicated. I don't know how to explain it. You don't need to explain anything to me, I snapped. I saw everything. The affair, the lies, the way you two have been playing me for a fool. I could feel the tension rising in my chest as I gripped the phone tighter. The betrayal was overwhelming, and I could barely keep it together. But just as I was about to hang up, Mark said something that stopped me in my tracks. I have something to tell you, he said, his voice suddenly serious. Something that changes everything. What? I asked, not sure if I should be interested or just hang up and be done with him. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. There's more to this than you think. I didn't just get involved with Sophia because of whatever emotional connection we had. There's something else going on. Something bigger. I think Sophia is in danger. I froze, my mind racing as I tried to process what he was saying. Danger? What was he talking about? What do you mean? I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. What kind of danger? Mark took a deep breath. I can't explain everything over the phone, but I think you need to hear this. Meet me. We need to talk face to face. It's important. I didn't know what to think. On one hand, I was furious, and every part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell. But on the other hand, there was something about his voice, something that made me question if there was more to this story than I knew. I'll think about it, I said, still unsure. But don't think for a second that I'm gonna let you get away with this. Whatever you have to say, it better be good. Mark didn't say anything else, just hung up after a short pause. I was left standing there in the middle of the room, the phone still pressed to my ear, the weight of his words lingering in the air. Sophia's in danger? What did that even mean? Was Mark trying to manipulate me? Or was there some truth to his words? I stared at the phone in my hand, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. There was a part of me that wanted to ignore him, to never speak to Mark again. But another part of me, the part that still cared about Sophia, wanted to know more. If she was really in danger, I needed to find out. But if it was just another lie, then it was going to be the final straw. I had a decision to make. It was clear now that I couldn't just sit back and let things unfold. I had to act. But how could I know what was the truth? I sat back down at the table, my head spinning. What was going on? What did Mark know that I didn't? And what kind of danger was Sophia really in? My gut told me that I wasn't anywhere near the end of the story. No, it was just beginning. The weight of Mark's words hung heavy in the air, pressing down on me as I paced around the room. Danger? Sophia in danger? I couldn't understand it. Every part of me wanted to ignore Mark's request for a meeting. He was the last person I should trust, and yet, there was something nagging at me, something I couldn't shake off. I glanced over at Sophia, still sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying, her face pale and broken. She had been quiet for the last few minutes, like she was waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to make sense of all this chaos. But I couldn't make sense of it. Not yet. What did he say to you? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a hint of fear in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if it was fear for me or for herself. I stared at her for a long moment, debating whether or not I should tell her about the phone call. But in that moment, I realized something. I couldn't hide anything from her anymore. The lies, the deceit, the way everything had spiraled out of control. It was all out in the open now. Mark called, I said, my voice rough. He said, you're in danger. Sophia froze, her breath catching in her throat. What? That doesn't make sense. Why would he say something like that? I don't know, I replied, my mind racing. But he wants to meet with me. He said there's something I need to hear. Her face paled, and I could see the panic starting to rise in her eyes. No, she whispered, shaking her head. This can't be happening. I walked over to her, taking a seat beside her. Sophia, what aren't you telling me? What's going on? She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. I swear, I didn't know this would happen. I never thought Mark would get involved in something like this. But I was trying to protect you. Protect me? I repeated, my confusion deepening. From what? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. From the truth. From what's really going on behind all of this. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? What truth? Before she could answer, my phone rang again. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. Mark. I answered the call without hesitation. I'm coming, I said, my voice more determined than I'd ever felt. Tell me where we meet. Mark gave me a location. A secluded spot outside of town, far from any prying eyes. It was an odd place for a meeting, but the urgency in his voice made me realize that whatever he had to say, it was serious. I'll be there in an hour, I said, my mind racing. I hung up and turned to Sophia. I have to go. You stay here, and don't go anywhere until I get back. Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and something else. Maybe guilt, flickering in her gaze. No, please don't go. Please don't meet him. This isn't safe. I couldn't explain why, but I couldn't let it go. Something inside me told me that this meeting was important. If Sophia was in danger, then I needed to understand why, and fast. I have to find out what's going on, I said, my voice firm. I'll be careful. Promise. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house, leaving Sophia behind. Her words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't let her fear stop me now. I needed answers, no matter what the cost. As I drove toward the meeting spot, my thoughts raced. What was Mark involved in? What kind of danger was Sophia really in? And how did it all connect to the mess we'd found ourselves in? The road seemed endless, the night growing darker with each passing minute. Finally, I reached the location, a rundown warehouse on the edge of town. It was quiet, too quiet. I parked my car in the shadows, trying to keep a low profile, and stepped out into the cold night air. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that the moment I stepped inside, everything was going to change. As I approached the warehouse, I saw a figure standing by the entrance, waiting for me. It was Mark, but this time he didn't look like the confident, cocky man I had seen before. This time he looked scared. "What is this, Mark?" I asked, my voice hard, as I took a few steps closer. "What's going on?" He looked around, as if checking to make sure no one else was nearby. "Listen, you need to hear this, man. This is bigger than you think. There are people involved in this, people who won't stop until they get what they want. Sophia. She's in danger, and it's because of me." I stepped forward, my fists clenching. "What are you talking about? You're the one who dragged her into this mess." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously. "I didn't want to, but I got caught up in something. There's a guy who's been following Sophia. He's dangerous, and now he's after both of you." Couldn't believe it. My mind was spinning. Who's after her? Mark hesitated, his face tense. "His name is Derek. He's got connections, people who aren't afraid to use force to get what they want. And Sophia, she's the key to everything." The pieces of the puzzle started to come together, but there were still too many gaps. Why is Sophia involved in this? Mark took a deep breath. Sophia's father was involved with them years ago. He owed them a lot of money, and now they're coming after his family to collect. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. Sophia's father? I had no idea she was connected to anything like this. She had never mentioned it before. "This is crazy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "So you're telling me that Sophia's in danger because of her father's debts?" Mark nodded grimly. "Exactly, and I'm trying to protect her. But now they know about me, and they're coming after both of us." I stood there, stunned by the revelation. My mind was racing, trying to process everything Mark had just told me. Sophia wasn't just dealing with an affair. She was caught in something much darker, much more dangerous. And now I had to make a choice. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face as I stood there, processing everything Mark had just told me. It felt like the world was spinning, like my life had been turned upside down. Sophia's father was involved with dangerous people, and now, because of his debts, she was the one in danger? I looked at Mark, my mind racing. "You're telling me that everything, the affair, the lies, all of it was just part of something bigger? Something I never knew about?" Mark's eyes dropped to the ground. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this, man. But now that you know, I don't think I can keep hiding it anymore." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the anger building inside me. "What else aren't you telling me, Mark? If you're really trying to protect Sophia, you better start giving me answers." "All of them." Mark swallowed hard and looked up at me. "I don't even know where to start. This goes back years, before I even met Sophia. Her father, Daniel, he got involved with the wrong people. They were into some serious illegal stuff. He owed them a lot of money, and when he couldn't pay, they came after him. And his family. That's why Sophia's always been so guarded about her past. She's been running from it her whole life. I shook my head in disbelief. Sophia never mentioned any of this. Why? But why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice filled with frustration. Why didn't she trust me with this? I would have helped her. Mark's expression softened, but it was clear he felt guilty. She never wanted you to know, man. She didn't want you to get involved in all this mess. She thought she could protect you, keep you safe from it. But now it's too late. I took a step back, trying to process everything. Sophia had been keeping secrets from me for years. The affair wasn't just a betrayal. It was part of a much darker picture. And I was right in the middle of it, tangled up in something I didn't understand. Mark, I said, my voice cold. You're telling me all this now because it's too late. But how do I know I can trust you? You've been lying to me from the start. Mark didn't flinch. I know I messed up. But I'm telling you everything now because I don't want to lose her. I never wanted to hurt her, but I was trying to protect her, too. She's been living with this fear her whole life, and now it's come back to haunt her. I felt a pit form in my stomach as I thought about Sophia, my wife, the woman I thought I knew so well. Had she been living in fear all these years? Had I been so blind, so caught up in my own world, that I didn't see the signs? Mark continued, his voice growing more urgent. You don't understand. Derek isn't just some thug. He's connected to a lot of people, powerful people who don't care who they hurt. If they think Sophia knows something, or if they think she's hiding something from them, they won't stop until they get what they want. I felt my blood run cold. Derek? Who was this guy? What did he want from Sophia? And why hadn't she told me about him? Tell me more about this, Derek, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. How is he connected to all of this? Mark hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. Derek's one of the people who's been looking for Sophia's father for years. He's the one who's been pushing for the money he owes. And now, he thinks Sophia knows where it is. She doesn't, but Derek doesn't care. He'll do anything to get it. My head was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about Sophia, was starting to unravel. How deep did this go? What other secrets had she been hiding? Sophia doesn't know where her father's money is. Does she? I asked, trying to clarify. Mark shook his head. No, she doesn't know. But Derek doesn't believe her. He thinks she's lying, or worse, that she's hiding it from him. That's why he's been watching her. That's why he's been following her. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Sophia. She's been running from this her whole life, and now it's catching up to her. But it wasn't just her life that was at risk. It was ours. I couldn't let this happen. I turned to Mark, my eyes narrowing. What do we do now? How do we stop him? Mark seemed to hesitate for a moment, like he was weighing his options. I don't know how much longer we have, but I have a plan. We need to get Sophia out of here. We need to get her to safety, and we need to make sure Derek doesn't get his hands on her, or the information he's looking for. I was still processing everything, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let Sophia face this alone. I couldn't let her get dragged into a world of danger and deceit that I didn't understand. No matter what it took, I would do whatever I could to protect her. But there was one problem I hadn't considered. What if Derek was closer than we thought? The feeling of urgency never left me. Mark had just revealed that Sophia's life wasn't just in danger because of her father's mistakes. It was now a game of survival. Derek, the man searching for her father's money, was relentless. But as much as Mark had given me a glimpse into the darkness surrounding Sophia's past, there was still one thing I couldn't figure out. Why hadn't Sophia told me all of this? I looked at Mark, my thoughts racing. You're telling me everything now, but there's still so much I don't understand. How did you even get involved with this in the first place? Mark shifted uneasily, his eyes darting around the empty warehouse. I never meant for it to go this far. When I met Sophia, I had no idea about her past. She didn't talk about it, and I was just trying to get close to her. But then I found out about the debts her father owed, and I got pulled in. At first, I tried to help, but then Derek started getting more aggressive and, well, you know the rest. My fists clenched in frustration. Mark had known about this for so long, and he never told me? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. So, you got involved, and now everything's falling apart. But where does that leave Sophia? What's the plan to keep her safe from Derek? Mark looked grim. That's the problem. Derek's been watching her for months. He's been tracking her every move. The more we try to hide, the more he gets suspicious. We need to get her away from here, somewhere he can't find her. But there's no way we can just run without him catching on. The weight of the situation was becoming clearer by the second. It wasn't just about getting Sophia away from Derek. It was about protecting her from the world she'd been hiding for so long. But as I stared at Mark, I started to wonder. Was he telling me everything? There was something in the way he avoided eye contact. Something that made me feel like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Mark, I said slowly, narrowing my eyes. Are you sure you're telling me everything? I can't help Sophia if I don't know the full story. I need to know all the details. Mark hesitated for a moment, as if he were debating whether or not to tell me more. Then he let out a heavy sigh. There's one more thing, he said quietly. I don't think you understand just how deep this goes. Derek isn't the only problem. There are others involved. People who don't just want Sophia's father's money. They want Sophia too. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? What are they going to do with her? Mark's voice dropped even lower. Sophia's father wasn't just in debt to these people. He made some deals, some really bad deals, and those deals involved Sophia. She's the key to everything. If Derek doesn't get what he wants, he'll go after her. And if he does, he'll probably use her as leverage. The shock hit me like a wave, knocking the breath out of my lungs. Sophia wasn't just a target because of her father's debts. She was a target because of what she knew or what people thought she knew. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to process it all. This is insane. I had no idea any of this was happening. And now it's all coming for her. For us. Mark gave me a grim nod. I don't know what to do anymore. I've tried everything to keep her safe. But the more I try, the more I realize I don't have the power to stop this. There are people in higher places than I can reach, and they won't stop until they get what they want. I stared at Mark, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. What did he mean by higher places? Who were these people? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to this story, more I wasn't being told. I need to talk to Sophia, I said, my voice firm. I have to know if she knows anything else. If there's something she hasn't told me. If we're going to fix this, I need the truth. Mark didn't argue. I get it, but be careful. She's been hiding things for a long time, and I don't know how much she'll be willing to share. I didn't care. I was done playing games. The lies, the secrets, everything had to come out now. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but wonder what else Mark was hiding. Was he really just trying to protect Sophia? Or was there more to his story than I realized? I drove back home, my mind racing. Who could be after Sophia? Why did her father's debts still matter? And why was I only hearing about all of this now? When I arrived home, Sophia was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes full of worry, but she didn't speak. I walked over to her, trying to remain calm despite the storm raging inside me. Sophia, I said gently, sitting down beside her. We need to talk. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. I know, I've been trying to keep it from you, but I can't anymore. There's so much you don't know. So much I've kept from you. I looked her in the eyes, the sense of urgency growing. Tell me, Sophia, everything. No more lies. I need to know what's going on. I need to know the truth. Her voice was shaky, but she nodded. I'll tell you everything, but please, don't hate me for keeping this from you. And then, just as she began to speak, the phone rang again. I froze. This time it wasn't Mark. It was Derek. The sound of the phone ringing echoed through the quiet room, making my heart race. I glanced at Sophia, who had gone pale in an instant. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone, but I stopped her. Don't, I whispered, my voice tight with fear. It's him, isn't it? She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Derek? He knows. The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. He knows? How could he know? Mark and I had been careful. We hadn't told anyone what we were planning, and yet here it was, the final confrontation, coming faster than I had ever expected. I reached for the phone before she could, my hands shaking. This was it, the moment everything changed. I answered it, my voice steady but my heart pounding. Derek. There was a pause on the other end, a brief silence that felt like an eternity. Then his voice, low and dangerous, cut through the air. I knew you were getting too close, my friend, Derek said, his tone dripping with mockery. I thought I'd give you a little more time to figure things out, but you're running out of it. Your wife has been keeping secrets from you. A lot of secrets, and I'm here to make sure she's well taken care of. The words made my blood run cold. He's been watching us. But how much did he know? How much had Sophia really been hiding from me? I swallowed hard, trying to control the panic rising in my chest. What do you want, Derek? You've already hurt enough people. Just leave us alone. Derek laughed, the sound dark and hollow. Leave you alone? I'm just getting started. You have no idea what's coming. Do you? Sophia's father thought he could escape his debts. But now his daughter's going to pay the price. It's all part of the plan. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the situation. What was he talking about? What plan? And how did he know everything about Sophia's father's secrets? You'll never get away with this, I said, my voice stronger now, despite the fear gnawing at me. Sophia doesn't know anything. She's just been running from this her whole life. She's not the one you're looking for, but Derek wasn't listening. He was too far gone, consumed by whatever twisted vision he had in mind. I know everything, he said, the smugness clear in his voice. Your wife is the key to everything, just like her father. And now I'm going to make sure she's really involved in all of this. I've been planning this for a long time. The game's not over yet. In fact, it's just beginning. Suddenly, everything seemed to come crashing down. Sophia had been a pawn all along. But why didn't she know? What had her father gotten her into? I turned to Sophia, who was sitting frozen, her face pale and tear-streaked. She hadn't moved since the phone call began, as if she were too scared to speak. I could barely keep my anger in check. Sophia, tell me the truth. What's he talking about? What is all this? Her lips quivered, and her voice came out in a barely audible whisper. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I felt a surge of confusion, mixed with anger. What do you mean you didn't know? He's saying you're the key. You've been involved in this from the start. How is that possible? Sophia looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and regret. I had no choice. When I was a kid, my father promised me to them, to Derek's people. He said it was the only way to protect me and my family, but I didn't know what they were really doing. I didn't know how deep it went. I ran from everything. My world felt like it was shattering. Sophia, the woman I thought I knew, had been living in fear her whole life, forced into something she could never escape. Her father's decisions, the debts, the lies, it was all part of the plan. But Derek had twisted it into something darker, something far worse. What does he want now? I asked, my voice strained with a mix of disbelief and anger. He's not just going to leave, is he? Sophia's voice trembled. No, he's coming for me. He'll never stop until he gets what he wants. I felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just Derek anymore. It wasn't just about the money or the power. He had plans for Sophia, plans that involved more than just revenge. And now, I realized, I was stuck in the middle of it, powerless to stop what was coming. But there was still one thing left to do. Couldn't run, couldn't hide. Not from Derek and his people. Not from the web of lies that had been spun around Sophia's past. There was only one option left. We fight back, I said, determination filling my chest. We make sure they know we're not going down without a fight. We'll bring everything into the open. The truth, the lies, everything. Sophia looked at me, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But how? They're too powerful. We can't beat them. I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. We don't have to beat them. We just have to make sure they can't control us anymore. We expose everything. We tell the world what's really going on. There was a moment of silence. A heavy, uncertain silence that hung between us, like the calm before the storm. But in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't alone anymore. We were in this together. And if Derek thought he could tear us apart, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. The days following Derek's phone call felt like a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything other than Sophia and the danger closing in around us. Every moment was heavy with fear and uncertainty, but there was no turning back now. Derek had made it clear that he wasn't going to stop, and neither could we. We spent hours locked in discussions, planning our next move. The weight of the situation was unbearable, and yet we had no choice but to move forward. We need to be smarter than them, I told Sophia, pacing back and forth in our living room. We need to expose Derek and everyone involved. If we can get the truth out there, maybe we can stop him for good. Sophia sat on the couch, staring at the floor. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, but she looked more distant than I had ever seen her. I could tell she was struggling, torn between the truth and the fear of what it might bring. I don't know if I can do this, she said softly, her voice trembling. I've been hiding from this my whole life. It's too much. What if it's too late? What if Derek already has everything under control? Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on taking action, on fighting back, that I hadn't stopped to consider how this was affecting her. This wasn't just a game of survival for me anymore. It was her life, her future, and the choices she had to make. The weight of it was crushing. We'll get through this, Sophia, I said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. I promise. You don't have to do this alone. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw the fear in them. It was the kind of fear that had been buried for years, an overwhelming fear of what was to come. But what if I can't escape it? What if Derek and his people find me, and there's no way out? I squeezed her hand. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. You're not alone in this. We'll fight together. But as much as I wanted to reassure her, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. Derek's reach was far greater than we had realized. He wasn't just some ordinary criminal. He had connections that could make everything feel like a game of chess, and we were losing. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, and I kept going over every detail, trying to find a way to break free of Derek's grip. But it was only when I stood by the window, staring out into the darkness, that the reality hit me. What if we were too late? The sound of Sophia's footsteps behind me snapped me from my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. I've been thinking, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe it's time for me to leave. Just disappear. Get as far away as I can. That way, Derek won't be able to find me, and you'll be safe too. The suggestion hit me like a punch to the stomach. Leave everything behind? Could I really let her go? No, Sophia. I won't let you go, I said, turning to face her. We fight this together. We're not running. She looked at me, her expression torn. But what if it's the only way? What if running is the only way to save you? To save both of us? The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. I could see that she was willing to sacrifice everything to protect me, but I couldn't let her. I couldn't let Derek win by tearing us apart. We're stronger together, I said, taking her hands in mine. We'll figure this out. We'll face this head-on, no matter what it takes. For a moment, I saw the conflict in her eyes, the fear, the doubt. But then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, we'll do this together. The moment we made that decision, the weight on my shoulders seemed a little lighter. It wasn't much, but it was a start. But even as I told myself we could face this together, a small voice in the back of my mind couldn't help but wonder if we were truly prepared for what was coming. Could we stop Derek? Could we really escape the web of lies and danger he had woven around us? The next morning, the phone rang again. My stomach churned as I grabbed it, knowing that this call would change everything. Hello, I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice was tight with tension. There was a brief silence before Derek's voice came through the line. Colder, more menacing than before. I know where you are, Derek said, his words sending a chill down my spine. And I'm coming for you. This game is over. My blood ran cold. How had he found us? How was he always one step ahead? Derek, don't do this, I pleaded, my voice trembling. You've already hurt enough people. Stop this now. Derek let out a low laugh, one that sent a shiver down my spine. It's too late for that. You should have known there would be consequences for getting involved in this. Now it's time to pay the price. With that, he hung up. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what he had just said. It was over. He was coming for us. I turned to Sophia, who was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. He knows, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Sophia took a shaky breath, her face pale. We don't have much time, do we? I shook my head. No, we don't. We need to act fast. It's time to take this fight to him. We had reached the breaking point. Derek was no longer just a shadow in the background. He was coming for us, and this time, there would be no escape. It was time to take back control. The moment Derek hung up, everything around me seemed to stop. The room grew silent, the weight of his words sinking in like a heavy stone. I looked at Sophia, her face pale, her body tense with fear. She could see it in my eyes. The realization that everything we'd been trying to avoid was now crashing down around us. They're coming for us, I muttered, barely able to believe it myself. We don't have much time. Sophia shook her head, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. What do we do now? What can we possibly do? Her voice cracked, and it broke something inside me. I had promised her we would fight, but now, as the danger loomed closer, I wasn't sure what that fight would look like. We were up against something far bigger than just Derek. His network, his reach, it stretched farther than we could ever have imagined. We have to move fast, I said, forcing myself to sound more confident than I felt. We need to gather everything we can on Derek. His connections, his plans, anything that can stop him. I could see the fear in Sophia's eyes, but there was something else too, a glimmer of resolve. She nodded slowly, her hands shaking but determined. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. I grabbed my phone and started making calls, trying to reach anyone who might be able to help. It felt like everything was happening at once. So much information, so many pieces to fit together. But the truth was, Derek had already made his move, and we were playing catch-up. An hour later, we were at a small cafe, meeting with someone who claimed to have information on Derek's operations. The place was crowded, the noise of the bustling customers muffling the tension in the air. As we sat down, I couldn't help but feel like we were being watched, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Every passing face felt like a potential threat. Do you have what we need? I asked the man across from us. His name was Alex, and he had claimed to be an insider, a former associate of Derek who had grown disillusioned with his methods. Alex glanced around before speaking, his voice low and urgent. I've been tracking Derek for months. He's dangerous and he doesn't stop. But I've got something. A list of names, locations, people he's worked with. It's all here. He slid a small, crumpled notebook across the table. I grabbed it without hesitation, my fingers trembling as I opened it. There were names, phone numbers, and addresses too many to count. Derek had his fingers in every pie, every corner of the city. But with this information, we had a chance to bring him down. Before I could say anything, Alex leaned in closer. There's more, he whispered. I found out about a meeting he's planning. A big one. He's bringing all his associates together. If you want to end this, you need to be there. The blood drained from my face. This was the opportunity we had been waiting for, the chance to take down Derek and his network all at once. But it wasn't going to be easy. It never was with Derek. Where is it? Sophia asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Alex hesitated, his face tense. I can't tell you exactly, but I've got an idea. Meet me tonight. I'll give you the details. We didn't have much choice. We had to trust him, even if it felt like we were walking into a trap. It was the only shot we had. That night, we met Alex in a dark alley, away from prying eyes. He handed us an envelope with a map and a time. An hour from now. It was all happening so fast, but we had no time to waste. Derek was closing in on us, and the clock was ticking. We followed the map, adrenaline coursing through our veins. But as we neared the location, something felt off. The building was abandoned, dark and silent. No lights, no movement. It looked like no one was there at all. "This doesn't feel right," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded. "Stay close." We entered cautiously, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. The tension in the air was thick, the silence suffocating. We reached the center of the building, and then, bang! The sound of a door slamming behind us made us jump. I spun around, but it was too late. A group of men, Derek's men, emerged from the shadows, surrounding us. I felt a cold chill run through me. We had walked right into his trap. "You thought you could play this game, huh?" Derek's voice boomed from the darkness. "You thought you could take me down. But now it's over." My heart raced. This was it. But just as I was about to react, Sophia stepped forward, her face set with determination. "No," she said, her voice strong. "It's over for you, Derek. We have everything we need to bring you down. It's too late for you to win." The men hesitated, confused by her words. Derek's smug smile faltered for a split second. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone growing sharp. Before he could respond, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. A recording that exposed everything: Derek's illegal dealings, his connections, his plans. The entire operation was laid bare, all the evidence we needed. Derek's face twisted with rage. "You think this will stop me?" he growled. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I stood tall, my voice unwavering. "We've already won. You're done, Derek." The police arrived moments later, storming the building and arresting Derek and his men. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty. It all vanished in an instant. The battle was over. But as the dust settled, a part of me couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. The war was won, but the damage had already been done. Derek had destroyed so many lives, including Sophia's. The weight of it all hung heavy in the air. As we walked out of the building, hand in hand, I knew that this was only the beginning of our recovery. The aftermath would be long and painful, but at least now we had a chance to heal. We had taken back control, and no matter what came next, we would face it together. The days following Derek's arrest were anything but peaceful. What should have felt like a victory was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. The battle with Derek was over, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something darker, something neither Sophia nor I had seen coming. Despite the relief of knowing Derek was behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends left untied. I found myself obsessing over the details, poring over every piece of information we had on Derek and his operation, trying to figure out what we had overlooked. One afternoon, Sophia came to me with something that caught my attention. She was holding a small, worn-out envelope, its edges crinkled as if it had been opened and closed countless times. "This came for you," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly as she handed it to me. I took the envelope, my heart skipping a beat. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, but it was addressed to me. The moment I ripped it open, I could feel my blood run cold. Inside was a single piece of paper. No letterhead, no return address, just a simple message written in a hurried scrawl. "You think you've won, but you've only seen the tip of the iceberg. Derek's just a pawn. Watch your back." I stared at the message, the words hanging in the air like a cold shadow. It didn't make sense. Derek was locked up, he was out of the picture. So, why was someone warning us about him? Why was this happening now, after everything we'd been through? Who could have sent this? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer her. The possibilities ran through my mind, but none of them felt right. Was this someone from Derek's past? Someone trying to get revenge for his downfall? Or was it someone even more dangerous, pulling the strings from the shadows? I sat down, trying to make sense of everything. My thoughts were racing. If Derek wasn't the mastermind, then who was? And why hadn't we noticed? What had we missed? As I looked at Sophia, I realized that even though we'd taken down Derek, the real enemy might still be out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was as if we were playing a game of chess, but the board had just changed, and we hadn't noticed until it was too late. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I glanced at Sophia, who gave me a nervous look. Neither of us was expecting anyone. But as I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Standing in front of me was Alex, the man who had given us the information that led to Derek's arrest. But there was something off about him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I stepped aside, letting him in, but I could already sense that something was wrong. Alex wasn't the type to show fear, not after everything he had been through with Derek's operation. Something had changed. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He swallowed hard before answering. "I didn't want to tell you this, but I think it's time you knew. Derek wasn't just a small-time player. He was working for someone much bigger." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who?" Alex hesitated, looking around as if checking for anyone listening. "I don't know their name, but I know they're connected to some of the most dangerous people in the world. Derek was just a pawn in a much bigger game. They've been watching you. They know everything about you." My mind spun. We thought we were done with this nightmare, but now it seemed like the real battle was just beginning. Alex continued, his voice dropping lower. "I tried to get out, but they threatened me. They have people everywhere. And now they're coming for you. You can't trust anyone. Not even your closest allies." I was stunned into silence. My brain was struggling to process what he was saying. We were being watched. All this time, we thought we were the ones who had taken control. But the truth was, we had been pawns in someone else's game all along. "I didn't want you to get involved," Alex said, his voice filled with regret. "But I couldn't let them get away with it. I never thought it would come to this. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want." Sophia's face had gone white. "What are we supposed to do now?" Alex took a deep breath, looking us both in the eye. "Run. Leave everything behind. If you don't, you'll be dragged into a war you can't win. I'm telling you this because I don't want to see you get hurt. They're already looking for you." His words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, I was frozen, unable to move. Everything I had fought for, everything I thought I knew, was slipping through my fingers. The world I thought I understood was being torn apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. "Can we trust you?" I finally asked, my voice shaky. Alex nodded, his expression hardening. "I'm the only chance you've got." With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me and Sophia in stunned silence. As I looked at her, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. We had won the battle against Derek, but now we were facing something much more dangerous. Someone out there was pulling the strings, and we had no idea who they were or what they wanted. "We can't stop now," I said quietly, determination setting in. "We have to keep going. For our future. For everything we've worked for." Sophia nodded, her resolve matching mine. "We'll find them, and we'll make them pay." But as the door closed behind us, the truth settled in. Our fight was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning, and we had no idea just how much further down the rabbit hole we were about to fall. The days following Alex's warning were a blur. It felt like our world had been flipped upside down, and I was struggling to keep my feet on solid ground. My thoughts kept circling back to the message he had left us. Someone bigger was behind Derek, someone dangerous. But who? I couldn't focus on anything else. Every phone call, every knock at the door made my heart race, and I could feel the tension building, suffocating everything around me. My life, once so ordinary, now seemed like a game of survival, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to win. But there was one thing that was clearer than ever. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. No one, not Derek, not his mysterious boss, could just walk over us and expect to win. If they thought they could play with our lives, they were wrong. I would make them regret it, every single moment. I turned to Sophia, who had been just as shaken as I was by everything Alex had told us. Her face had lost its usual light, replaced by a quiet determination. "We can't let them destroy us," I said, my voice cold and firm. "We need to strike back. We need to show them that we're not afraid. Sophia looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine, weighing the decision. And then, without hesitation, she nodded. Revenge? She asked softly. Yes, I said, a fire burning in my chest. But not just for us. For everyone they've hurt. For all the lives they've destroyed. We're going to make them pay. It wasn't just about retaliation anymore, it was about taking control. Derek, his shadowy associates, and anyone who dared to harm us would know one thing. We were no longer the victims. The first step in our plan was to gather information. We needed to know exactly who we were dealing with. Derek's arrest had been a victory, but it had left us with more questions than answers. How deep did this network go? Who was calling the shots, and what were they capable of? I spent hours going over every detail of Derek's past, his connections, and his financial dealings. It was painstaking work, but eventually, I started to see a pattern. There were people, big players in the city, whose names kept popping up. People whose businesses were intertwined with Derek's, people who had money and power. They were the ones pulling the strings, and if we were going to hit back, we needed to go after them. The more I dug, the more I realized that these people weren't just criminals, they were dangerous. They had connections in every corner of society, from law enforcement to politicians, from corporate giants to street gangs. They operated in the shadows, unseen and untouchable. But not for long. I pulled Sophia into every step of my investigation. I couldn't do this alone. She was smart, resourceful, and determined. Together, we pieced together a plan. One that would expose the network for what it was and take down the people behind it, starting with the ones closest to Derek. We spent the next few days setting up meetings with the right people, informants who had ties to Derek's operations. They were scared, but they were also desperate. Some of them had already tried to back out, but they had been threatened, silenced, and forced into doing things they never wanted to. But we had something they didn't: leverage. Are you sure this is the right move? Sophia asked, her voice tense as we prepared for our first meeting with one of Derek's associates. These people are dangerous. We don't know what they'll do. I know, I replied, my voice steady, but we can't sit back and wait. We need to take action now. We need to send a message. Our first meeting was in a dark, run-down warehouse at the edge of town. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We were stepping into enemy territory, and the risk was enormous. But there was no turning back now. The man we were meeting, someone who had worked closely with Derek, was named Victor. He was a middleman involved in several of Derek's illegal ventures. He knew the inner workings of the operation, and we needed him to give us the information we were missing. When we arrived, the air was thick with tension. Victor was sitting in a chair, his arms crossed, eyes darting around nervously. He knew why we were there, and he knew what would happen if he didn't cooperate. I don't have much time, he said, his voice low and shaky. What do you want from me? Information, I said, my voice cold and direct. Everything you know about Derek's operation and the people behind it. We know you have something to offer. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Victor hesitated, glancing at the door, as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. His eyes flicked nervously to Sophia and then back to me. I've been trying to get out of this mess for years, he whispered, his voice breaking. But they won't let me. I thought Derek would be the end of it, but no, it's worse. There's a whole network, and they'll never stop. Not until they have everything. What are you talking about? Sophia pressed, her voice sharp. Victor swallowed hard. I'm talking about the people who control everything. The ones who use people like Derek to do their dirty work. They're untouchable. And if you try to go after them, they'll come after you, your family, your friends. They'll burn everything down. I could see the fear in his eyes. He wasn't lying. But I didn't care. We had come too far to back down now. If these people thought they could scare us into submission, they were wrong. I don't care about your fear, I said, my tone hardening. Tell me what I need to know, or this ends right here. Victor sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. You don't know who you're dealing with, but if you want to go after them, I'll help. But you have to be ready. Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. His words were a warning, but I didn't flinch. This was the moment we had been waiting for. The war was on, and we were going to fight until the very end. With Victor's information in hand, we began to put our plan into motion. We knew who our real enemy was now, and we were going to make them pay for everything they had done. The hunt for revenge had begun. As the dust settled and we stood victorious, the weight of everything that had happened began to sink in. It felt surreal, like we had lived through a nightmare and somehow come out the other side stronger. The people who had tried to destroy our lives were now exposed, their secrets out in the open, their power shattered. It was over, or so we thought. But the truth was, the real victory wasn't just in taking down Derek or the people behind him. It wasn't about revenge, even though that had been sweet. It was about reclaiming our lives. We had fought for our peace, our freedom, and now we had it. But how do you rebuild after everything that's happened? How do you trust again when betrayal has torn everything apart? I looked at Sophia standing beside me. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, always there, never wavering. She'd pushed me to act when I was afraid, held my hand when I doubted myself, and fought with me every step of the way. She was my partner in more than just this battle. She was my reason to keep moving forward. "We did it," Sophia said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "But what now?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as I thought about the future. What would it look like after everything had fallen apart? Could we really start over? Could we trust that the world wouldn't crumble again at our feet? "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we'll figure it out. Together." And that was the truth. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And that was enough. The rest of the city would never know the full story, but I didn't care. What mattered now was that we had the chance to rebuild, to create something new out of the ashes of our past. It would take time, but we were strong enough to face whatever came our way. As the sun set on that chapter of our lives, I knew one thing for certain. The real beginning had just started. The road ahead was ours to walk, and it was full of possibilities we had never imagined. We had learned the hard way, but we had also come out on top. And now it was time to write the next chapter, one where we chose the direction. What would you do if you were in my shoes? How would you rebuild after everything that's happened? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it with others who love a good twist-filled journey.